Try not to trip on this. Thank you for giving me your attention and your time. I so appreciate the opportunity to connect with you guys today. And I would like to start out by sharing some of my story, and then at the end I'm going to ask you if you have any questions and we can interact at that point. So my name is Portia Louder, and I grew up here in Utah. How many of you guys know where Richfield is? Small town in southern Utah? Yep. I grew up just outside of Richfield, and I'm the oldest of 7 children, and my parents were non-traditional. And I don't know, maybe your parents were too. I don't even know what traditional means, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about my parents. So my mom was a hippie. My mom loved creative things. She liked outdoors, and she didn't care about education. And that she thought education looked a little bit different. I say she was kind of like anti-institution, anti-establishment, but she really just struggled with any kind of structure. And there were 7 kids. I'm the oldest. So you can imagine 7 kids, one after another, how chaotic things got. We lived out in the country, so we had a lot of fun. We made things and created things, but when it came to going to school, it wasn't something it wasn't even required. In fact, my brother, when he was in 3rd grade, rode the bus to the school and asked if he could start school, and that was the first time he had been in a school. So do you think it was difficult for me when I started going to school? It was super hard. It was hard to sit there, right? And what I've learned is that it's important to learn how to learn. And so I really started to struggle by the time I was 12 or 13 years old. And my first struggle was boys. My first struggle was I thought what boys thought of me was the most important thing. And my parents were members of the LDS church, but we weren't super active. I don't know what that means exactly, but at 13 I was done with that. I wasn't interested in that anymore. And I started to date lots of older boys, and that's about the time that I started to party as well. And that led to me getting pregnant when I was 17 years old. And I moved out into a low-income apartment, and I started babysitting other kids that were also in single-parent homes. And I remember looking around, and I certainly didn't think that I could ever go to college. I had no plans. I just thought that if I could get married and find the right guy, everything would work out. And I remember meeting a guy that was about 10 years older than me, and he made me this super awesome proposal. He said, "You should marry me because I can take care of you." I said, "Okay, let's do it." And so a month later, we got married in his brother's backyard. And things weren't going great for me at that point. And my dad got transferred to Salt Lake. So to give you an idea of how small my world was, I had never been on an airplane, and I had never been to Salt Lake. And so I drove up to see my parents, and I took my son with me. And I remember coming up over the point of the mountain and thinking, wow, there's a whole world out here. I could get a job. I could have a life. And so I went back and I told my husband, I said, "Hey, I want to move to Salt Lake and get a job." And he said, "Yeah, well, I'm never leaving this town, so if you want to go ahead. We'll just get divorced." And so that's what we did. We filed for a quick divorce, and he gassed up my car, and I drove up to Salt Lake. And my uncle gave me a job taking pictures. Now, I hadn't graduated high school yet, but I went and got my GED, and that would be really beneficial to me later. So as soon as I get to Salt Lake, I find out I'm pregnant. And so I called my ex-husband, and I say, "Okay, so I'm having a baby." And he said, "Yeah, well, I don't want anything to do with you, so you're on your own." And I remember feeling really alone and scared. How am I gonna make a life for myself? I'm not getting any child support with my kids. I love my kids, but I'm not giving them the best life. And after my daughter was born, I remember looking around again and thinking, I just need to find the right guy. Once I settle down, everything will be okay. And so I started dating again. And I got pregnant again. Now this time I'm really scared because now I'm a little bit older. I've had a job for a while, and I'm starting to see that my kids need better. They need a father, and I'm not doing great. And I said my first prayer because I wasn't too excited about anything to do with religion, but I was scared. So I said a prayer, just please help me know what to do. And I felt this comfort and warmth come over me, and I knew that I was going to have a child that I wasn't mine to keep, that he was special, but that I needed to find the family that would adopt him. And I remember being really convinced that there was the right family for him. I went to several different places and looked through lots of files. And finally, I found this file. And they already had 3 boys, and I was having a boy. And so the lawyer told me, there's no way we're going to let you, that's not going to work for you. But I'm pretty stubborn, and I said, but that's the right family. And so eventually, I was able to sit down with this family, and I knew right away it was the right family for my son. And it wasn't just the right family for him, it was the right family for me because they supported me through that process. And then when David was born, I felt completely empty inside. I remember I had no idea why, but I just felt so empty, and I had this pain. And I took that pain, and I set it aside, and I put it in a box. And I thought, I can keep going. And the doctor prescribed me Percocet, and then I thought, all I need is more Percocet to make the pain go away. And I just kept using it, and my life got worse and worse. I lost my job, and I remember Percocet wasn't enough anymore, and I started to use street drugs. And late one night I came home, because I didn't want to be home. I didn't want to be around my kids. I felt so terrible and yucky inside. I didn't want to be home anymore. And I came home late one night, and my mom was standing there by my son, and my little boy, my oldest son, who was 8 years old, had been crying for hours waiting for me. And my mom looked at me and she said, what would it take for you to change your life, Portia? This little boy, all he wants is you. If that's not enough for you, whatever would be? And that night, I took my son and I walked downstairs and I laid on the floor and I sobbed. And I begged God, take this from me. I just want to be a good mom. I don't know how to do it. I'll do whatever you want me to do. I just can't do it anymore. And my little boy, he said, Mom, what's wrong? Mom, come here. And he grabbed my hand and he pulled me into the bathroom and he goes, you're beautiful, Mom. Look at you. You're beautiful. And I promised myself that I would go to any length to change my life. But I had tried that before. I had made lots of promises to myself that I would never use drugs again. And every time I broke those promises to myself, I was truly not able to quit. And so the next day I did something pretty courageous, and that is I walked across the street and asked someone I didn't know for help. And I just said, I need help. And I understand that you know something about this, and I'm a drug addict. Will you help me? And he said, let me call someone, because I wasn't looking very good, and he thought he was concerned for me. So he called a friend who was really involved in a 12-step program. I had never been to a 12-step meeting. I didn't know what they were. All I knew is that I had usually been able to power through situations, and I couldn't anymore. And so I went to my first meeting. Now, I don't know about how many of you guys have been to meetings or your family's been to meetings, but for me to walk in to my first AA meeting and there's a guy in the front of the room who's sober, and he had been through a lot. He was sharing his story. He had 2 years clean. That's a miracle. And that was a huge miracle to me because I couldn't get a couple days clean. I had to go outside and take a smoke break every 5 minutes. I had nothing going for me at that point. I was weak. And so after the meeting, I walked up to him and I said, what can I do to change my life? I don't know what to do. And how do I get what you have? And he handed me the big book, which is a set of principles that will change your life. And he said, read that and you're going to have to become a good person. And I remember thinking, I don't think I can do that. That sounds hard. I don't even know where to start, And so I started down this path, and they told me to do a few simple things, like go to meetings, right? Stay sober for 24 hours. It was so hard. It was so hard. I remember on a daily basis, I would have cravings and dreams, and I walked away from the people that I knew before because I was tired. I was so tired of suffering. So I remember being 6 months sober. I don't know how many of you have struggled with addiction, but for me, 6 months sober, I went to the zoo with my son. And he was 10 years old. And I'm sitting there looking around and other moms that are there with their kids, and I wanted to scream, I'm being a good mom. Look at me, I'm being a good mom. It was miraculous for me. And that's when I knew that there really is a power that is cheering us on. That the power that created this earth has the power to change our lives. That's when I knew that there was a God that loved me. because something happened in my life that I couldn't do myself. I was sober. So there's some things that happen when you get clean, when you really get clean. One of them is your life gets really good. It's not easy, it's just good. I didn't have that fear and that weight anymore. And step by step, I'm becoming a better mother and a better person. And I started to live a more principle-centered life. Well, I met my husband, and I had already promised that I was done dating, but I met my husband, and I have no idea why my husband would date me, because he had his life together and my life wasn't. But he said he saw something in me, and he decided that he wanted to marry me, and he adopted my kids. And we bought a little house. Now, I woke up every day grateful for that. I knew what I had every day, and I was humble and I was grateful. And I started to build my own company as a photographer. And I remember how exciting that was for me, making my brochures, willing to go work hard, the way that I felt about myself, taking my kids to school in the morning. I was seeing miracles happen in my life. My business grew a lot because I was doing the right things. And I wasn't prepared for things to grow as much as they did. And I ended up having 2 more kids. And then my back went out and I had a back surgery. And when I look back at this time in my life, I would just say, Portia, be honest with yourself. Be honest with yourself, because the doctor wrote me a prescription for prescription drugs. And if you're a drug addict like me, you know that one pill is all it was one pill for me, and then it was another prescription and another one. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I can do this because I'm not using street drugs. And I'm slowly giving away all of the important things to me, my integrity with myself, with my husband, with my kids. And for me, when I start to use drugs, I don't just like to use drugs, I like to hustle. Pretty soon my integrity is going to crap, and I get involved in these illegal real estate deals. Now, I can remember how it felt when I was involved in that. The weight that I carried, the way that I felt about myself, the fear, it was terrible, heavy. And I remember when the FBI showed up at my house. I literally showed him a picture of my family and said, please go away. You can have everything I have. Please just go away. You don't know how hard I worked for this. And the FBI said, they just didn't even talk to me. They looked at my husband, who was standing there. I'm standing there with my 3-month-old baby at the time. And they said, you're going to need to decide if you're going to stand by her or not. Because if you stand by her, there's a good chance that you're going to get indicted too. And I saw everything I had worked for slip away just in a second. And this would have been a really good time. There's some things that I've learned, some lessons. One of them is the power and accountability. This would have been a really good time for me to tell the FBI, I made some mistakes. How can I make it right? There is so much power in that statement. I've learned that a mistake is a mistake. A far worse mistake is to deny your mistake. The second that you accept and start to admit that that mistake happened, you have power to move forward in your life. That mistake has so much power over you when you deny it. You make it bigger and bigger, and you're afraid of it, and you hide from it. That's what it was for me. And I kept making excuses. Well, there were a lot of other people doing worse things than me. The banks are dirty. They're dirty. But deep down I knew, because there's a place inside you that is truth. And it's powerful, and it wants to shine. But I just kept denying it. And I just made everybody mad. I told the FBI, you go take a lie detector test. You guys are all a bunch of liars. That went over really well. By the time I got into the courtroom, they could not give me enough time. And I remember the day that I walked into the courtroom. It was the federal courthouse in Salt Lake City. Maybe some of you have been in a courtroom before. For me, it was the most lonely, sterile day of my life. Because that's when I knew what I had done. Because up to that point, I've been making excuses, and I was really good at thinking, I won't get any time, I don't have any priors, I don't know. When I walked in the courtroom, I knew different. I knew that I was going to get the maximum sentence, and my range was 0 to 7 years, and I could feel it. The judge is going to give me the 7 years. And my husband is sitting back behind me, and my children are all sitting there. And I think, what have I done? I couldn't even control it. Tears just started streaming down my cheeks. And I remember thinking, I just want to get back to my kids. How do I get back to them? It just seemed so far away. I remember the judge saying, Miss Louder, do you have anything you want to say? And I said, I just want to apologize. I didn't even know what to say. It took my breath away. I remember them saying the United States of America versus Portia Louder and thinking, the whole United States? It just felt so lonely, so lonely. The judge sentenced me to 84 months, which was 7 years in federal prison. And then my husband stood up and he pled with the judge on my behalf and asked him to give me time to say goodbye to my children. And I watched him try to compose himself because he was so emotional, hand our little girl to my older daughter and say, please, Your Honor, she needs the support. Give her time to say goodbye to me and her children. And that was the most tender day of my life, to see a man that I had hurt the way I had stand there and advocate for me. And that's when I knew that I would go to any length to change my life to be worthy of that love. And I knew we were going to get through it. I knew that. The judge gave me 8 weeks to say goodbye. And on our way home, I was so blown away. My mind literally was shocked that I had seen the world the way I had prior to that experience. I thought, why did I think money was important? How foolish. It mattered not at all. I gave away time, something so valuable and precious. Time with my children, I gave it away for nothing. How could I have done that? And I wondered why the world was still acting like it was normal, because it wasn't normal for me anymore. Everything changed. When I went home, I watched my children sleep. I remember driving my son to school and wondering how I could have missed something so beautiful and never noticed. The last night I spent with my family, I walked into each of their rooms, I cleaned my house, and I sat in my living room, and my sister called me and she said, Portia, are you okay? I said, no, I am not okay. And she said, Portia, you're the strongest person I know. You can do this. And I said, I can't do it. I can't do it. And then my mother came, and I said goodbye to each of my children, and I got in the car, and my husband drove me to Dublin, California, and I watched my children drive away. Now, when I walked in to the prison in Dublin, California, I had no idea how alone and broken I would feel. People say, were you scared? Oh no, I was so low. Scared would have been a way big climb up for me. I was so brokenhearted and devastated. I went and laid in my cell for 3 days. 3 days. I was detoxing too, so that added to the fun, but it was so hard for me. I looked around and thought, I can't do 7 years here. I can't do a week. And I remember that I went out and I sat at this table with this other gal. Her name was Bubbles. I still don't know her first name, but anyway, I was crying so hard. I'd be like, she goes, breathe, honey, just breathe. You're going to be okay. The pain will go away. Just keep breathing. I thought, how could it? How could some sweet little girl who doesn't even know me know what I'm feeling and know that it's going to pass? When I went back to my cell, my bunkie said, hey, they've been looking for you. They might take you to a suicide cell because you haven't eaten anything, you're not doing well. I said, just go away. And then I got on my knees and I said the most important prayer I've ever said, and I was truly low. And I remember saying, I have failed everybody. I failed my children. I failed myself and my community. I'm in the deepest hole. I feel like nobody to anybody. I just need to know who I am to you. I can't do this. And I remember feeling the most incredible amount of love I've ever felt. And I didn't just feel love. What I felt was complete connectedness to everything and everybody. And that's when I knew we are so incredibly valuable. Everyone in that prison had such an important purpose. I had no idea how valuable we are. And we're not valuable when we don't make mistakes. We're so valuable in our mistakes. And that there truly is a power that is with us and cheering us on, that loves you more than you can ever comprehend, that is working in your life. And I started to listen, and I found people who were amazing, who had challenges much greater than mine, who were talented and beautiful and brave, and they were my friends. And they were hurting like I was, and we walked through it together. Now, it took me a while to get past the denial. I'm going home soon. I'm not going to do this time. Everything's going to be fine. I got a lawyer out there. Everything's going to work out. But isn't that what I was in the whole time leading me up to going to prison? Was that denial? And I started looking around and seeing people were stuck. There were people that weren't moving and weren't progressing, and I had this time. And believe me, that time is precious and valuable. So valuable. You get a chance to get away from the world. You get something that people out there sometimes pay a whole lot of money to get. But you have a perspective. We have a perspective. We see the world a little different because everything's been taken away. We're strong. And I started to wonder, who am I going to be? What does my future look like? I don't want to be stuck anymore. And then I saw a woman who taught me everything I needed to know. She got up in front of a group and she completely admitted all of her mistakes. She said, I'm 100% here because of me, because of my choices. I hurt my children. I lied. I hurt my husband. And she got very specific. And I felt so much power when she did that I knew that accountability and truth was my ticket to move forward. That's what I needed to do. So I made a list. I got very honest with myself, and it wasn't easy. I hurt my kids big time. My son told the principal to F off at his school because the principal said, you might end up like your mom. You're going down the wrong path. And when my son told me, I said, Jackson, I don't want you to go down the same path I did. I don't want you to go to prison. I love you, honey. And it's not the principal. It's me. You need to tell me how I hurt you because I hurt my kids. I used drugs. I lied to them. They didn't know. They felt it, right? They felt it in the home, but they didn't know. They didn't know why it felt so uncomfortable. And I kept telling them, I'm not going to prison. You don't have to worry. Everything will be fine. You know what my daughter told me after I was sentenced? I said, Dad's not going to prison. They're not coming for Dad. She goes, I don't believe you anymore, Mom, because you lied to me. Do you think she was right in saying that? Absolutely. I hurt my kids. So I decided to get brave and get honest. And I made this list, and I told the girls in the rec to come down to the rec yard with me, and I said, I need you guys to listen to me. I want to tell you everything I did to hurt anyone. And I felt really scared, and I said it anyway. And then I told them, I'm burying this stuff in the rec yard, and I'm going home free, because now's your chance to get honest. Now is your chance to get your power. And that's what I did. You know what happened? My whole soul opened up. I started to imagine a different future. I didn't know I was going to be speaking and doing the things that I do today. I wrote a book. I didn't know I could do that. You know, the doorway to everything beautiful in my life was truth. It was accountability. I put it out there. It didn't have power over me anymore. And now, I got to the point in prison when somebody would say, hey, Louder, why'd you do that? And I would tell on myself. I'd make up an excuse and I'd say, hey, I just lied to you. I want you to know the reason I did that was this. When you start telling on yourself, that's when you know you're on the right track, because you care more about yourself than what that person thinks about you. You care more about your integrity and your character than the immediate consequence. You'll start seeing growth in your life in an unbelievable way. So I want to tell you guys how beautiful my life got, okay? I started connecting with people, and by the end of my sentence, I felt so free and happy. I remember sitting there with a bunch of girls dancing in the rec yard and thinking, this might be the most beautiful day of my life, the joy that I feel. Guess who waited for me? My husband. He was waiting the day that I got out, standing outside with flowers, which is miraculous. And when people say, I can't believe you waited, I say, oh, I was worth it. I worked hard to be worth it. That's something everyone can do wherever you are. You can do the work. You can be worth that job that's waiting for you. You can be worth that person that loves you and doesn't even know you yet. You're so valuable. Guess what else happened? I opened the box, the pain that I felt inside, and I allowed myself to feel it. And when I got home, my son, who's standing here videoing today that I gave up for adoption, reached out, and I got to meet and connect with him. Guess what else? He didn't even know I was a photographer. And he loves video, and we get to share that. It's so beautiful to me. So many beautiful things have come into my life because I chose to be honest and brave. I'm sitting here today with a hero, Manny. You're going to get to hear from him, who's been through some of the things you've been through. I probably haven't. My parents were a little bit chaotic. My parents didn't use drugs. My parents did the best they could, and their best was pretty good, and I didn't realize it. I used to think it's everybody else. It's not. We all have difficult things, and we're all amazing. And your most difficult thing makes you even more amazing when you overcome it. And you can. You can. I want you guys to know what a true honor it is for me to connect with you. I don't know you all, but I get to feel you being in this room. You're important, so important. You can help people I never could. Your story matters. There's somebody out there whose life will be changed because of you. You get to decide how your life ends. You get to decide what this experience means for you. You absolutely do. I'm grateful for this time that I got to spend with you. I'm going to open it up to some questions. I don't know, if you have any, but I would love to share any questions that you have. Please ask, and then we'll take a lunch break, and we'll come back, and you get to hear from the coolest guy, one of the coolest guys I know, which is Manny. So, anyway, thanks for letting me share.